Welcome back, everyone. Here we are at A Plus Parents. One more time, glad to have you here. And I have a super special guest today. Her name is Amy Sloan. Let me tell you a little bit about Amy because Amy is awesome. So Amy and her husband, John, I'm jumping right to your husband right like that, but they're second generation homeschoolers. So Amy's going to tell us what that means. What is it to be a second generation homeschooler? And they have 5 children. They're from 6 to 16 years old. And they live in North Carolina, where they pursue what they call a restfully classic education by grace alone. So I'll let Amy say more about what that is as well. But if you hang out with Amy for any amount of time, what you'll quickly learn is that she loves her overflowing book stacks, her giant mugs that are in her office, her beautiful memory work, and just silly memes. So we'll have to get some of your favorite things that you see about that as well. It's super cool. And she also, you can find her, maybe she takes a break from time to time. And when she does, she's going to bust into some kind of song and dance. And she's into 90s country music or Shakespeare. So that's pretty cool. Amy has her own blog. It's called humilityanddoxology.com. And she has her own podcast. And you can find her at Homeschool Conversations on that podcast. And we'll have all the links up for you and get everything going. So Amy, welcome. I'm just super excited to have you here. We've had a chance to work together and do some things in the past. So glad that we're doing this. So kind of guess, kind of like there's kind of like the introduction, right? But if you are going to tell people who you are and what you're up to in life, how would you describe yourself and what you're up to?
Well, I am so excited to be here with you today. Thank you for having me on. It's fun. I got to interview you on my podcast last season, and now I get to chat with you again. I think pretty much that introduction sums it up. I'm a mom and wife, first and foremost, a child of God, and here enjoying the adventure of homeschooling with my kids. It is certainly a challenge. I like to say that homeschooling is the best hard thing I do. Because I think, we have to keep both of those things in mind. It can be really hard some days, but it's also totally worth it.
I love it. Sorry about that. I have there we go. You put the phone on silent and it vibrates anyway. And it's still interrupting and distracting, right? So, yeah. Okay. So tell me, what is a second generation homeschooler? What is that? So our listeners out there, they know what that means.
Yeah. So my parents and my husband's parents were some of those brave pioneers who homeschooled, practically before the internet, before it was easy to get to homeschool curriculum, before it was really accepted, when people would still look at you kind of askance and say, why are you not in school if you went to the grocery store with your parents in the morning? My parents gave me a wonderful education. I had a great experience being homeschooled. I was given that love for learning, that desire to keep learning. Learning wasn't something that just happened in a textbook. It wasn't something that was just, on a worksheet. It was part of our whole life. So there was this curiosity and delight in good books and adventures and field trips and more good books. And so I knew even before John, my husband, and I got married, we talked and we were like, we want to do this with our own children. Now my husband went to public high school. And that was a good experience for him as well. He was homeschooled up through 7th grade. But we knew that homeschooling was something we wanted to pursue with our own children. And I tell you what, I am so thankful for all those parents who really paved the way when it was not as easy as it is for us today. Now we have so many curriculum options. Sometimes the hard part is picking the best option, right? And so I'm just really thankful for that experience and that background and that perspective it gives me that homeschooling works and it's worth it.
Yeah. Wow. Well, we need to thank your parents and John's parents both, really, because you're right. They were pioneers when this all came. I've been around the homeschool idea, right, and being involved in homeschooling for about the last 11 years. And what's great? My son is 16, and he still says, "Dad, thank you." Like he thanks us, right? It's just, how often does that happen that your kids say thank you for something cool like the gift of homeschooling? So that's awesome. So, oftentimes I ask people, were you able to use your homeschool, your own experience in school as a homeschool family, right? So this is kind of interesting because you're going to have a different take than most people, because most people didn't grow up as that second generation homeschool family. So for yourself, what did you see that you've seen that you could take from where it was from before when you didn't have the internet, you didn't have, I mean, you really had to create things. And how did you take that, or the things that you brought with you that you learned from, that you saw that your mom did with you and that your family did when you were young? And then how did you adapt that into today's world full of technology and programs like what we put together? Like this is all new in this day and age. So how did you adapt and bring, like, where you kind of got to bring the best of the best, and then be able to kind of really infuse it into what you're doing today?
Yeah, I sometimes tease my teenagers because online classes were just sort of starting when I was in high school. So I took some online classes myself, but I joke with them that I did that back on stone tablets. So of course now, they're on the internet for their learning quite a bit, and I'm very thankful for that technology. Um, so one of the things I think I definitely carried with me from my own homeschool experience was this idea that we didn't have to fit inside a box. I think especially those early homeschoolers were really kicking up against the system. They were rebels in a real sense. Like we were paving a new way, trying something different. And I think that always having that kind of experience, like I didn't come into homeschooling expecting that my homeschool had to look like anyone else's. And so that's a real benefit because I think now, even within the homeschool world, we've created new boxes for ourselves.
Mm.
Sometimes the divides homeschooler from homeschooler, even. And so to have that perspective that I'm the boss of my homeschool, it's not the boss of me, is something that I've definitely taken from my experience as a second generation homeschooler. I think one thing that has changed is I'm a different person than my mom. She had two
Mm.
children. I have five. I have a different set of personalities in my home. Our lifestyle is different than my family of origin. And those aren't good things or bad things. They're just different. And so I had to kind of come to grips with the fact that my homeschool was going to look different than my mom's did. And that was okay. So, kind of, I didn't have to do deschooling in the same way someone who came through public school education did. But I still had to remind myself that it was going to be different and that was okay.
Wow. Oh, that's so great, though. That's great. And does your mom, how is she, that you're a homeschool mom as well? Does she, because it's like, when you first have kids, right? Your moms want to come in and they want to help you parent, of course, right? So do you find that, is your mom, is she a great coach for you when it comes to being to homeschooling?
Definitely. I'm very thankful for both her educational experience and also the prayers that she gives for me knowing how hard parenting is, as well as for my mother-in-law. Both of them are incredible encouragements to me now. I'm very close to them both. Been really interesting is my mom kept a lot of those books from our homeschool years. So it's kind of like I get double the library. I'll be like, hey, we're studying the Middle Ages this year. Instead of buying all those new books, can I just come borrow them off your shelf? So that
Oh,
works out
that's
really
so
well for
great.
me.
Oh, that's awesome. You get a great library to go to, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's so cool. Okay. And so you're a writer as well, right? And so I know you've written different articles and, and different blogs and different things that you've done. So, it's interesting because you're a homeschool mom, you're a wife, you're a mother, right? And you're a business person all at the same time, right? So let's chat a little bit about the business side of Amy, and tell me something about, like, when you're doing your research or you come up with an idea to write something. Maybe tell us about something, one of your favorite articles you've written, and then what's the process you go through? Like, what inspires you to put something like that together?
This is a hard question because it's sort of like, which is your favorite child? Um,
Right.
yeah, so I started humilityanddoxology.com on sort of a whim, which is not normally how I do things. But people had been telling me, oh, you should write a blog, you should write a blog. And I was like, I will never do that. And then one day I just randomly started one, and it's been such a delightful adventure. And I love being able to model for my children that moms are people too, that I get to
Mhm.
pursue that creativity, that pattern of wanting them to like look forward to adulthood, right? So I think there are probably three things that are common themes that come up in whatever I write. So one is this idea of identity. Who are we? And finding rest. For me and my faith, it's in the work of Jesus Christ. And so there's this sort of idea about rest and being enough, and all those things. And I just try to really focus in for myself on that work of Christ. And that gives me great
Mm.
hope and rest because homeschooling can be stressful.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
second thing I really love to talk about is textbook free history in particular. So, again, this probably comes from my second generation experience. We were always traveling and doing field trips as a family, reading good books, getting into museums after hours because my mom didn't know how to take no as an answer. And so, for me, this idea of history is this very living, engaging, adventurous thing, not something that is dry and boring and lists of dates and facts. And so that comes up a lot in what I write about. I have a textbook free history masterclass. I have lots of free resources with ideas for pursuing history in that kind of unique way. And so, along with that, kind of similar but different, the other thing I love talking about is beautiful memory work. Memory work can get a bad rap. I love talking about memory work, but not lists of facts. I love poetry and Shakespeare, historic documents, speeches from the past. Those are the things that are real priorities in my own homeschool. And I love encouraging homeschool parents to include that in their own homeschool.
Well, okay, so say more about memory work because I know when you say like I think of memory work like, okay, well, I got to memorize my times table. Now I'm a math guy, right? So I'm thinking memorize my times tables, a quadratic formula, those things, right? When you say memory work, I think you have a different view of that. So just what do you when you're saying memory work, what is that? How would you define that for people? Like what does that mean to you?
While I certainly love math, I'm not one of those people who's like liberal arts, yes, math, no. I love it all. I just think it's all fun to learn. So there's a place for factual memory work or times tables and things like that. But when I'm really focusing with memory work is I talk about knowing things by heart. And this idea of knowing things by heart is different from just being able to regurgitate something word perfectly. It's when the things you have learned and the things you have studied have really sunk down inside of you, that they're affecting the way you see the world, the way you understand other points of view. And so when we sit together as a family, we start our day with morning time, youngest to oldest, and we just read a poem together or
Mm.
we sing a song together. So I'm not sitting there quizzing the kids, making sure they can say things exactly right, but we're all saying it together. These and we talk about it, I love it. There's nothing that just makes my heart go pitter patter like, do a Shakespeare quote as a joke with each other some random Tuesday afternoon.
Right.
And so that idea of memory work is being changing the things we're thinking about and having these ideas, these things that are really beautiful and true, become a part of us. They really do become a part of us and are we're storing up those ideas for hard days.
I like that. I've been playing with this idea, and I'm like I'm in this like inquiry is probably the best way to say it, right? And really looking at the difference between learning something and knowing something. And you're so pointing at that right now because it's like it's like even like your times tables, right? Do you want to learn your times tables? Do you want to know your times tables? And I think when you're talking about your memory work, that when you get something in your memory, the way that you do it and do it with your family is that it leads to the side of knowing something versus you just learned about it, that you really know it. And I think that's amazing. That's really cool. So how do you take that memory work and then apply it beyond history and apply it to other subjects? How do you work with that? Or from Shakespeare and it brings to something else? Like how do you see that in other homeschool subjects?
Yeah. So of course it's easy when you're thinking about history, you can find from the time period or a poem from the time period. But this works with things like science. So if you're studying the weather, teach your children, read together poems about rain, about birds, about wind, about clouds, where they're starting to see these connections of ideas all around them. Because the
Mm.
subjects, we know this as homeschoolers, subjects aren't in little boxes that are just distinct from one another. This is life. This is humanity. This is the world that God has made, and it all connects together. So the
Mm.
more we can bring in poetry even to our science, it makes things beautiful. And even there's some silly math poems, you can include even just to laugh. Sometimes bringing in that laughter to the subject brings joy. You may not be learning a fact that will, be quote unquote practical for that subject, but that joy and that fun that enlivens whatever we're learning about.